Hi, I'm not Godwin. Tonight, we will solve Godefroy and find out why he is an exact copy of Godric and spark a very interesting line of questioning that I think that we can all try applying to the many characters of Elden Ring. But to get to the point, I think Godefroy is Godric's blood and not just a reused asset. To find out why, we'll look at the origins of this identical Godric lookalike and why he has been a thorn in the lore community's paw for years. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Enekipu, Banoon, Ooze, Prince of Death, Pevigale Sage, and Scum Mage Infer for reading the item descriptions, Daniel D. Teach for fixing most of the audio and generally helping me complete this video. Banoon even contributed the more glamorous shots you'll see, so I beg of you to check out each of their channels. Now, we can begin.
The very oldest stories of the beginning are, sooner or later, about blood. At least that's one theory.
Dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, is often caused by severe trauma, such as neglect, or physical, or even emotional abuse, which can lead to a person developing multiple distinct identities as a way to cope with their trauma. But in Elden Ring, it may not be just trauma alone that causes the mind to split, but an inner conflict, the conflict of the warm idea of the person you want to be, and the cold reality of what you are. What you can do and what you cannot do. What tears your spirit apart and you become two or even three minds on a single problem. Developments in the psychology field have even led to POTS therapy, or properly known as internal family systems therapy, a concept that every emotion you've ever had or will have is merely a broken off piece of the center you. Core identity creates these new pieces in order to handle unexpected events, whether joyous or horrifying. You have created the happy version of you every time you felt joy, and you often meld with that self when you are swept away with this emotion. These parts of you often take three forms: the outcast, often the oldest piece created and trapped in eternal youth without guidance; the protector, who often does anything to prevent harm to coming to the outcast, often harming the outcast in the process of tough love and scorched earth policies.
No, Daddy, no!
The third type is the firefighter. They often try to suffocate the issues by pouring on a bounty of happy experiences over the trauma. When you avoid your problems by going to a happy place, this is your firefighter rescuing you to a place of comfort and avoidance. Aristotle and many of his Eastern equivalents believed that the soul was the form or essence of a living thing, not a distinct substance, but rather the organization of the body. In the fantasy setting of Elden Ring, this split personality, or rather spilt personality, fractures the soul or the mind, and thus the flesh follows suit. These fragments may have been born of a single mindset. Switching back to Godefroy, just south of where we meet Melina for the first time at Gatefront Ruins, we find words carved into stone swords reading,
Godric the Golden, humiliated having tasted defeat by the blade of Mikola, now on his knees, begging for mercy.
I fear this event fractured Godric into the bleeding mass of flesh Melina had slap-chopped into a stump, and the new and ideal form of what Godric could be, Godefroy. And possibly, who knows, maybe Godric's intense self-pity and sense of revenge against his family manifested in the form of Gostoc. If we are feeling particularly spiteful and decide to give him an axe massage, Gostoc does croak out this as his final words.
Damn it all! Why is it always me? What did I do to deserve?
Gostoc even has a line of cut dialogue with him insisting he is the son of Godric, thanks to the wonderful efforts of Stratek for finding this.
I am son of Godric. Unquestionably. I am son of Godric. Why won't anyone believe me?
If we follow even more cut content, the 1.0 version of Elden Ring had this to say about turtleneck meat.
Turtle meat is said to boost virility, but none in the lands between seem to have much appetite for it these days. In lands between, the urge to reproduce has waned long ago.
Let us simply imagine, just for as long as you like, that natural births are not the common form of procreation in the lands between. That it is only a primal privilege of the demi-humans and possibly even the Gloam-eyed Queen. Melina can help us out with our little game of make-believe with one of her oddly placed quotes once you have given Bach the golden sewing needle.
Your seamster, Bok. I see him crying from time to time. I think he misses his mother. He wants someone to tell him he's beautiful. Does being born of a mother mean one behaves in such a manner?
Motherhood seems to be the territory of gods in Elden Ring. This makes a lot of sense because Marika has put in place a mechanism to manipulate the cycle of death and rebirth. How Marika is mother to all who live in the lands between, and Radagon is father to all the misbegotten. Yes, in the game files, the misbegotten are known as the children of Radagon. Why, even Raya's questline in the Amnion item is quite a blatant hint at how shameful and uncommon earthly conception is viewed in the lands between. And yet, just like a snake shedding its skin to remove parasites, it creates an exact copy, yet something is missing. Even Daedakar's woe talisman might be a hint at how the spreading of shaman blood may be seen as a sin. For only a shaman could meld flesh in such a way to birth hybrid monstrosities. Hybrids, like mules and ligers, by nature cannot reproduce. Just like hermaphrodites. Perhaps the beastmen of the past are simply the product of shamans hiding in animals, or even dragon golems to avoid the jarring ritual. Which is very George R.R. Martin with his Children of the Forest in his Song of Ice and Fire series. A plant people who stored their souls in magical trees when they died. These children of the forest, to fight an invading force, planted their minds into animals such as bears, eagles, wolves, and even lions to defend their sacred trees from being burned.
Beast blood. Fresh beast blood, glinting with gold. Material used for crafting items. Found by hunting carnivorous beasts. This glimmering blood never rots or decays.
The implications of shaman hiding in animals makes this creepy chorus of critters even more disturbing. The coffin's exteriors, along with the animals' presence, seems to hint that they too are ingredients in a forgotten purifying ritual. Literal scapegoats.
Rose-colored putrescence that oozes from stone coffins, congealed into a large viscous lump. Material used for crafting items, found underground in the land to where stone coffins drift. The putrescence is what remains of the impure lives kept within the stone coffins.
Getting back to Godefroy, I believe this new version of Godric in his prime, Godefroy, became his idol, and Godric aspired to become him, identically in every way, similar to how Godric's axe mimics Godfrey's axe. If all of this feels a little far-fetched, I will remind you of the multiple angry voicemails and doppelgangers we fight along our journey. Mohg and Sewer Mohg. Mad Vyke and Everjail Vyke. Morgoth's 2 attempts to block our passing. The Fell Omen twins guarding Mohgs and Morgoth's runes. Blythe's shadow, the list goes on and on. D may have left an unintentional hint.
When grace is solid, it rots people from the inside. Breaks them.
I don't claim to know what grace is yet, but be assured it is a topic I will tackle in the far future. But for now, I refer you to Nameless Singer's investigations on the matter. Their work has always been stunning and refreshing. Oh, but back to this video. Keep it together. Shaman blood is more obvious in creatures with white hair. The blood of Marika and her family has spread itself, diluting and shamefully being swept under the rug, just like the Everjails in the Eternal Cities. Oddly enough, a culture of mirrors. Just like all the sources from this video being cut content. Again, if all of this seems a tad unreasonable, look at this. The blood of the shaman is clearly evident in the roots of the Nox giant corpses in this concept art. In fact, the depression spirits we find with mushrooms all around them may be persisting due to their shaman heritage, and this is even how we, a Tarnished, can see them and interact with them. Godefroy seemed to be such a menace that he was imprisoned in an Evergel after being captured by Dragon Knight Kristoff in the first siege of Leyndell. I find it telling that, let us say, brave Godefroy was captured while cowardly Godric used the Mimic Veil to escape the capital. Perhaps another clue is that Godefroy drops the Godfrey's icon. Godfrey is, of course, two people or two identities in one body that seems to switch personalities after being defeated and drenched in freshly squeezed lion juice. For Godfrey fans, this might be the right line of questioning to solve how Godfrey broke his legendary axe. If we go down this rabbit hole further, or rather, through the looking glass, we see the only other talisman in the game that is referred to as an icon is Radagon's icon. Another case of people sharing the same body. Perhaps these two characters are revered as icons because they have learned to reabsorb or to be reabsorbed by their other self. If we get crazy, we could say that Horlu does what Godfrey can't, sacrifice his friend to slay the Tarnished. And Godfrey does what Horlu cannot by being a stable and noble ruler as Elden Lord. The lore community has often portrayed Radagon as a manifestation of Marika's guilt, or at the very least, the scapegoat for all of the Golden Order's, reshaping efforts. Perhaps Radagon does what Marika cannot by being a tool of death, a loyal general, a studious father. Perhaps this is why these talismans are called icons. Because they are role models. Something to aspire to be. I find it odd that both are Elden Lords, and that Placiduce Axe's talisman is not called an icon, despite having 4 heads, 2 of which in the game files are designated as male and female. We could get even crazier and link this to the speech that the 3 fingers beams into Hyeda's brain.
All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
Finding a fingerprint grape and Hyeda so close to the throne of Stormveil and the act of grafting does remind me of this speech quite a bit, I must confess. What if the One Great was a victim of this phenomenon and birthed the Outer Gods in the exact same method? I'm sure you've noticed this stone platform that is almost everywhere. Raya Lucaria's Gate, the Queen's Bedchambers, Far Missoula behind the cowardly ancient dragon, outside the Bestial Sanctum, and many, many more locations. If we look at this stone platform I've nicknamed the Cosmology dais, we can start to imagine the fracturing of the One Great into 16 outer gods. The center portion is a flower radiant like the sun. This is most likely a sundew, said to be an ingredient in making the Philosopher's Stone through hermetic alchemy. Sundew plants are carnivorous plants that eat whatever stumbles upon them. The carnivorous plant is a fusion of the plant aspects of the greater will and the flesh-eating aspects of the fell god, and its lack of a better term, crimson cousins.
Let your flesh be consumed by the scarlet rot.
Now the second circle radiating outwards shows broken, mismatched stones, indicating a fracture in all directions. The third circle shows 16 flowers with 6 petals. Six-petaled flowers are a common sight in the lands between, found in many colors. They all have their own significance. In fact, a sorcerer's rise deploys blue hollowed-out putrid puppets if you dare to step on these royal blue-colored flowers. Or how these gold flowers are often found next to fulgur blooms, and the lightning it attracts. I think these flowers are the outer gods marking their territory like spray paint. Just as how the abyssal serpent shrouds everything in darkness with Mesmer's carpets? But the fourth outermost ring is the most tricky. Rather than being a line of X's, try to view it as a helix bent into a ring. The helix is a symbol of life and competition and the births that come with it. Through this interpretation, we see how the one great fractured and birthed 16 outer gods and or demigods who go about creating life and strife in this world. This pattern of one god birthing many lesser gods to help create the world is found in ancient Chinese religions, but also in the Silmarillion, the prequel to The Hobbit, the prequel to The Lord of the Rings. A work of literary splendor, George R.R. Martin, the co-author of the game, changed his name over. My point is that fracturing through distress and life sprouting from blood has deeper origins than we can imagine. And how the game's main theme seems to be of mending what is fractured, to marry the fell god and the greater will, to mend the divide, and quench a feud that began with time itself. How beautiful the writing would be if Godric stole Gostoc's arm to graft onto himself when we know they are both in essence the same person. Now, doesn't all of this remind you of a very unlucky maiden we meet in a church in Caelid? Oh, you don't seem to remember?
In which case, allow me to explain myself. I am of Melania's blood, but in what capacity I know not. I could be sister, daughter, or an offshoot. Whatever the case, though, I am certain of a kinship between us. There is something I must return to Melania, the will that was once her own, the dignity, the sense of self that allowed her to resist the call of the Scarlet Rot, the pride she abandoned, to meet Radahn's measure.
Now, Millicent is one of my largest allies for this theory. Another suspect child born of defeat and bloodshed. I feel Melania's swallowing her pride in order to defeat Radahn at any cost was the inner conflict she suffered, and the cause for her multiple daughters to spring out from her. Millicent is Melania's lost sliver of prudeness against being the sullied rot mother she has become. Even Millicent creates another self once rotted and shed blood from trying to stop the rot with the loss of her arm. You see, the proof lies in Millicent Church is missing an arm and is always present, and Swamp Millicent has 2 arms and is always present until Millicent is made whole once more. Her will to fight is rampant and wild out in the swamp. How familiar to Hoaraloo. Blythe is the most obvious case. Half of him wishes to obey Ronnie, and yet, for shadows like him, this is their lot. Life was granted to them for this purpose alone. He cannot disobey the 2 fingers. Perhaps this shaman method of birthing is a plot from the greater will. This would explain Ronnie's disgust with her own flesh, and her need to get rid of it. Malekith, and Grank being his alter ego, Grank takes, and Malekith is robbed, perhaps injured in the process. At the very least, we are seemingly encouraged to spill this loyal hound's blood either way. Yet Blythe's and Grank's shadow nature prevent them from dying. Perhaps this is the key to their immortality. Born anew from their blood with memories of the past, and thus the dark poisonous grudges that come along with them. Speaking of which, allow me to introduce you to one of my favorite missing characters. Meet Gilbert.
There is no escape from a Redeemer.
He has a tragically cut questline where he seeks justice for Melania's misdeeds and wishes to hunt her down. You'll notice he looks familiar. Yes, Jiren attempts to nurture his lord and tries to uphold his legacy, while Gilbert, the mirror image of him, is only obsessed with revenge, and has literally disassociated any form of loyalty to Radahn. Instead, Gilbert is fueled by the revenge of those who still suffer from the Scarlet Bloom in Caelid.
Empty ashes of war, unable to apply any kind of affinity in their current state, but can be used by Smithing Master Hugh of the Round Table Hold to recreate other ashes. Thus does the copy pass into becoming the genuine article.
I bring all this up because I want you to entertain this idea. Keep it in your back pocket and try to see Elden Ring's characters, especially twins, triplets, or relatives, or offspring of any nature, in a whole new light. So tonight we learned that Shaman blood could have been the cause of this Godric duplicate and many other questionable cameos. Through parts therapy, we learned that split personalities are an unavoidable part of experiencing the world, and how a deep sense of inner conflict might be what helps the Shaman blood flourish. We may even have learned what the three fingers meant when it described fractures and births. These are not all the connections I found. I left some all for you lovely viewers. I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and while you're at it, please like the video if you truly enjoyed it. Comment if you disagree. I can take it, really. Hit the bell to follow along faster with notifications to keep in touch, To keep in touch. I am not Godwin, and stay tuned for my next video where I'll cover the afterlife of sorcerers and witches in Elden Ring: The Way of Water. Until then, you are my sunshine. Good night.